Yeah.
So it wasn't soon after that we too long after that we changed the name to Kaleidoscopic Climax.
Well, I'm just looking for a four-leaf clover. I'm just looking for a piece of dirt. I'm just looking for that.
Welcome to Delmarvalous, Americana. I'm your host, Billy Earl Amos. This weekly program aims to examine the voices, the sounds, and the personalities of those people whose labor of love is music and the arts. Whether it's a local favorite or a rising regional act, we'll spend some time with them and their music here on WSDL 90.7 FM. And you can also find us on YouTube channel and on PAC 14 in Salisbury. Because, as we all know, a life without live music just ain't hardly worth it.
Okay.
We want to introduce a very special guest and a good friend this morning. This is Ron Pagano. Ron is an activist. He is a political person. He's a musical person. And he's a dear friend, and we welcome you, Ron. Thank you for coming on and sharing some space with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Billy. I really am honored to be here.
Well, you've earned it. You've earned it, my brother. Let's talk a little bit about your musical journey because it's a little different.
Well, yeah, I guess you could say that. As far back as I can remember, I must have been 5 or 6 years old, and my dad had taken me to an event where they had live music, and I remember just standing there and looking at the drummer, and just that was so cool hearing that beat, and it wasn't rock music. It was it was like they were playing 30s and 40s type of music at this event, but. My dad knew that I loved the drums. I always loved the drums. And so he asked the guy at the drums that if I could come up and play a song with the band, even though I had never, ever played before.
That's a lot of pressure.
I was 8. I might have been 8 years old. Who cares at 8 years old, So, so I got up there, and the lead guy says, how about When the Saints Go Marching In, which is a song I knew. My dad loved that song. So he always
Okay.
So I said, yeah, let's do that. And so they started playing, and I'm trying to, figure out how to play this thing. And of course the band, the set wasn't set up for me to begin with. So, I could only play a cymbal and a snare drum. Couldn't reach
Right, yeah.
that type of thing. But, I played along, and people in the audience were smiling and clapping and applauding. And I thought I was just hot shit. You know what I mean? That only encouraged me more, which is a dangerous thing because I eat that up. So, yeah, so that was my first occasion when I was able to perform for something that I loved. And it was soon after that, it was about 3 years after that I finally convinced my mom and dad for me to get a set of drums. And I came down on Christmas morning, and there they were, these blue metallic, beautiful babies. Some probably fifth world manufacturer made them, because they weren't Gretsch, they weren't Pearls, they weren't any of that. But they were my drums, and
I get it.
and it was great just being able to. And I finally, after a few days, I got them up into my bedroom and was able to play with them and start getting into it. And then it was soon after that I started playing with some guys from school, and that was the time of when songs like My Baby Does the Hanky Panky, remember that? And
Yeah.
Boys, and it was the mid-60s. So it was a lot of great music coming out.
Right
And,
on, man.
yeah, dude, yeah. But yeah, it was a lot of great music, and rock, and rock music in particular, and so that's how I started. That's how I started. And we called the first band, and you'll never understand this name, I'm sure. It was called Little Caesar and the Legionnaires. Can you imagine
Okay.
why? For those who can't see me on camera, I'm 4'4". So guess who Little Caesar was? But
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
so it wasn't soon after that we too long after that we changed the name to Kaleidoscopic Climax with 2 Ks, Kaleidoscopic Climax. And I actually put together how they used to have and still do, the bass drum picture.
Yeah, sure.
We put one together, and it was very psychedelic, and it looked pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, were you guys playing the club circuit there in New York?
No. We were playing the garage circuit. We were playing from Joe's garage to my house. Actually, we played in my bedroom because my house didn't have a garage. We were actually a townhouse in New York, and so it was loud, but it was so cool. I remember playing one time. We were practicing in my room, and we played the song Gloria, and
Yeah.
GL, where they spell it out.
No,
Well,
well.
my mom's name is Gloria. So all of a sudden I see the door open up, and she's standing there in the doorway with her arms crossed, like, oh, this song's about me, huh? I said, well, at least we didn't start off with hanky panky,
Right.
But yeah, she actually encouraged me to play, as she did in life in general. Just encouraged me to just do stuff. Don't hesitate.
That's a wonderful thing for a mother to do. At what point did you become more serious about this?
Well, I think when we started playing at the first thing we played at was the Battle of the Bands in our local church, Our Lady of Hope in Middle Village, and they used to have, it was great because we had a couple of young priests who were there, and they really wanted to get more teenagers involved in the church, and so they organized these Battle of the Bands. It was once a month on a Friday night, and it was great. It was a great way to have access to local bands that were playing. So anyway, so we played there and had a real good reception. And it was from there that we got a couple of calls to play at parties. And we started playing at local parties, graduation parties and just get-togethers of people. And we played then at a few clubs. I wouldn't call them clubs. They were restaurants with a stage, or bars with stage. And, we had to be careful because only 2 of us out of 4 were over 18. So,
right.
Back then they didn't push us a lot, for carding us, but, you had to be careful. But, we played a few places, and it was so much fun. And it wasn't then until I'd say almost 18 to 20 years later that I got back into playing, because I had to stop playing when I went to college. I had to focus on college, and then I went on to law school, and you know how that goes.
Yeah.
You're reading 300 pages a night. You don't have a lot of time for music. Although music was still part of my life. The 70s were great. I love the 70s. And, towards the middle end of 70s came people like Elvis Costello and those guys. And Motown was always a big part of my life too. Growing up in New York City, we loved Motown in New York City.
I get it totally.
And
as a matter of fact, let's play a couple of tunes here. Let's play The Times They Are A-Changin' and For What It's Worth, 2 very seminal songs in my history. And when we come back to Delmarvalous Americana with Billy Earl on WSDL 90.7, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about these seminal tunes and what they meant to you at the time and what they mean now.
Great.
Cueing it up. Okay, this is Billy Earl back with Ron Pagano. Ron is our guest today. He is a local musician. He's an activist. He's a political person. He is a UUFS, as I am. Ron, Bob Dylan changed a lot of things for a lot of people. What did it mean to you?
Yeah, well, I started listening to Bob Dylan when I was a camper at summer camp back in the early 60s. And I remember the first time I heard a Bob Dylan song, it was The Times They Are Changing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a guy who had a guitar, and we were sitting around in a group and out on the grass, and he started playing this song. And I was like, wow. And I must have been, I guess I was probably 11,
Right.
11 years old. So, fairly impressionable. And I heard this song and like, wow, that's really a great song, because it said so much about how, our parents did their thing. Now it's our turn,
Right. Right.
and it was our turn to make a difference in this world. And I think that really inspired me. I don't think I thought about it a lot in those terms, but I think now, obviously looking back on it, I see that as a seminal point in my politics, starting to think about the world larger than myself, and about what's going on in the world.
I feel exactly the same way. I remember the first time I ever heard For What It's Worth. First of all, I tend to listen to music, listening first to the guitar part, and then secondly, listening to the lyrical content. And that song just blew me away. Do you remember the first time you heard it?
I can't remember the first time I heard it, but I can tell you that the time period was, 67, 66,
Yeah.
67. And it was a time of, great change. I remember, I was in high school, and we actually had staged a demonstration in the high school, and to end the war, get out now.
Oh, yeah.
Type of thing. And that song to me epitomizes that time period. For me, that memory of, there's other songs, the Birds, the Yardbirds, Peter, Paul and Mary, a lot of those groups sang about politics and how we can change the world, how our generation could change the world. But this song in particular is, to me, when I hear it now, it comes on the radio or I play it at home, I see us in the streets.
Yeah.
I see us at the demonstrations. I see us at waving banners or waving the finger. However it was, I remember we were at a anti-Nixon rally, and somebody played that song, and it inspired us, to with the slogans. You remember one of the funniest slogans about Richard Nixon was "Get out now, like your father should have." It was an inspiring piece of music, and it led to a lot of other music of that generation that was politically inspired. I mean, one of my favorite songs from back then was Tin Soldiers.
Yeah.
Like Crosby, Stills and Nash. And I can still remember, at the time I was in, I was still a senior in high school. I was getting ready to go to college, and Kent State happened.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking to myself, God, I can't wait till I get to college so I can be part of this, be part of the anti-establishment dysenterianism, part of the rallies, part of the movement. And I found that by the time I got to college, Jackson State had happened after that. And
Yeah.
people were scared. People were getting scared of being shot, being thrown in jail. It was a real thing. And
It was real.
Yeah, it was real, and I think a lot of young people today understand it from a different perspective, from the Black Lives Matters perspective. But we put ourselves in jeopardy. In '72, when Nixon was running against McGovern, I was a big, obviously, McGovern supporter. I went up to New Hampshire and campaigned in the primary. And um, during that summer prior to the election, I was with a group of Vietnam vets against the war. I was at Hofstra University at the time in Long Island, and right next door was the Nassau Coliseum. And Nixon and Rockefeller were coming to speak at the Nassau Coliseum. So we went and we were able to get into the Coliseum. Now, one of the guys had a big, it must have been 7 or 8 feet long US flag that he had painted a peace sign on. And so a few of us got up in the middle of Nixon's speech. We were in about the mid section of the Coliseum. And all of a sudden he starts pointing. Nixon looks it up at us and starts pointing. And, we're showing the flag and we're saying, get out of Vietnam. And we're throwing all kinds of epithets at Nixon. And all of a sudden from behind us, these huge men with earpieces and a walkie-talkie and just reached down and grabbed us by our shirt collars and pulled us out of our seats. At the time I was using crutches, and I said, I got to grab my crutches. Grab your crutches, get out of here. That type of thing. And as I was going out, we were getting spit on. My recollection was these guys in their white patent leather belt buckles and white patent leather shoes, spitting on us and calling us traitors and good for nothings, and all of this. From that we were on the front page of Newsday, which was a Long Island newspaper at that time, a big newspaper, and so I had to explain that to my mom and dad. What were you doing there? Well, you know what? All I got from my mom and dad was just be careful.
Right. Yeah. The best possible advice.
Yeah. They knew they weren't going to be able to stop me. I was away at school. By then I was 18. So they couldn't stop me. So the best advice they could give was be careful. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The assassination of Kennedy, the killings at Kent State in the Vietnam War were seminal moments in a lot of lives. My dad had been a Secret Service agent and had guarded Nixon and thought the world of him. So we parted ways very early in life, politically and in terms of what could be said at the dinner table and what could not. Let me turn the attention to the next song we're going to do. Tell me about Corner of the Sky.
Yeah, when I was young,
Last year?
Last year.
Yeah.
This was, I always loved musicals. My mom
I do
used to
too.
play My Fair Lady at home, the original soundtrack, and I loved that. And so I went to see, in high school, I had a great English teacher. She took us to see Broadway shows. We saw Man of La Mancha and Hair.
Wow.
Pretty controversial for a high school student to take her students to Hair. But she did this, and it really made an impact on me. So when Pippin was out, I got tickets to go see Pippin. And, I was I don't know, I guess I was almost 20. And it was the type of thing where I was still looking. I didn't know really what I wanted to do. College wasn't going so great. It was soon after that I got an invitation from the dean of men to take a sabbatical from college. That's the nicest
Time
way
out.
take a time out, which I did. I took a year off. I worked, and then I decided, nope, I like school. I'm going back. But Pippin was important to me because it had some music in there that really fit where I was in my life. And this Corner of the Sky is, this fellow Pippin is trying to find out where he fits in, where he fits in life. What's he going to do? And that's how I felt. And when I heard this song in particular, This Corner of the Sky, I thought, this is my anthem.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really important to me.
Okay, let's cue this up and listen to Corner of the Sky.
Okay.
Okay, great song. Absolutely great song. Now I've got 3 songs queued up here that are all basically different, but all interesting and all definitely members of the soundtrack of our lives. The first is a song that when I was playing drums early on in junior high school, we tried to play this. We tried to play Sunshine of Your Love by Cream. We had a very good guitar player, but it just didn't sound the same, obviously. I've got another one here. This is Paul Simon, one of my favorite singer-songwriters, doing Mother and Child. And we've got Rush, which is a Canadian band that I think almost everybody our age is familiar with, although their catalog of music is far greater and far more influential than I think people give it credit for. Let's go ahead and roll these 3. And then on the backside, let's talk a little bit about what these songs meant to you.
Sure.
Okay, we're back. Eric Clapton had been referred to as God at that point. I remember my parents being very upset about that. But I'll tell you, his guitar work on that song, as well as Crossroads, was incredibly influential to me.
Well, I understand why you would say that, because you are a guitarist. For me, it was Ginger Baker. I mean, it was.
I was a drummer at the time. I didn't play guitar.
Right. Okay. Okay. You were. Oh, okay. Right. Back then.
I didn't pick up a guitar till I was 50.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, that's surprising to me. But yeah, I mean, Ginger Baker was like, after you hear Gene Krupa and you hear Buddy Rich, it's like,
wow,
Ginger Baker. And then of course Neil Peart in Rush, was just incredible. But yeah, those songs by Cream were just they were important to me because we played them. My band played them. And that was the kind of music we listened to. And White Room,
loved it.
I mean, let's face it, back then we all did a little, and those
smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, cigarettes,
yeah.
Man. And those songs were part of that. I always look at music as being able to define my life in terms of decades. This decade I did this decade I did this decade I did nothing. So I look at the decade of the 60s. I came alive in the mid 60s, 64 or 65. The Beatles, whenever asked if I was the question was always Beatles, Rolling Stones. I was always Beatles. Although later on I got to love the Rolling Stones. That was the first album I ever bought, was December's Children by the Rolling Stones. But Cream was just seminal in terms of guitar and in terms of drums for me.
Yeah, and the bass player. They were amazing.
Yeah,
they were amazing.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more songs here. We've got a Vanilla Fudge song, which my band used to play, and that was a challenging drum song.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, which opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then one of the great songs of all time, it's actually a Joni Mitchell song that was started off as a piano piece, but when CSNY did it, they changed everything. Let's go ahead and roll these 3. And on the backside, let's talk a little bit about it.
Okay.
Boom. Okay. Vanilla Fudge, I never had a chance to see them, but I always wanted to.
Yeah. And I don't know if they're still playing today. I think they are. I know up until a few years ago, they've been playing, all the while. That band, they were a cover band.
Yeah.
But they rewrote everything, and it was amazing to listen to, because it was, it was so for me, especially like you talk about the drums, the drums were incredible in that band. And, a lot of people don't know about Vanilla Fudge. You say Vanilla Fudge, a lot of,
I know.
especially nowadays.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah. But I thought back then they were my top, I would say within the top 5 of my favorite bands back then. Vanilla Fudge, Iron Butterfly.
Oh yeah.
Inagata Devita was another drum song that that I love to play. So yeah, Vanilla Fudge was, and they were big in New York. I think that's they were from Queens.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which is where I'm from.
Yeah.
So a lot of these bands that I came to love were local bands for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have too many bands from College Park, Maryland.
Well, yeah. What can I say? That Paul Simon song was also seminal to me in terms of a pivotal point in my life. When I was at Hofstra, it came out in, I guess it was 71. But I was up I mentioned before, I was campaigning for McGovern in New Hampshire, and they put a bunch of us on a bus and took us up to New Hampshire for a long weekend. And that song was one of the songs I heard on the bus. And I can remember looking out the window, and seeing the snow and just this song playing. You know how that memory happens. You connect things with music, parts of your life. And that was something that I connected to. And then we got to New Hampshire, and it was 4 feet of snow, almost taller than me. And it was, pretty amazing.
When I went to college, I went to a small Methodist school to play football in Virginia, and I was the campaign coordinator for George McGovern, and it was my first taste of the conservative right as a brick came flying through the window of our dorm room because I had a sign, McGovern for president. It was an eye opener, and it taught me a couple of things. I do remember, and I'll bet you do. I bet you were sitting there in front of the TV listening to Ed's show when the Beatles came on, weren't you?
You knew it. Yes, absolutely. I had just gotten out of the hospital. I had been in the hospital for about a year. And that was a pivotal time for me, because that's when I got to really hear a lot of music, because I had a 6 transistor radio.
Okay.
Have constantly, I couldn't keep up with the batteries that needed to be changed. My mom would have to send me batteries all the time. And I remember when the Beatles first talked about the Beatles coming to America. And I remember the DJ saying, "The Beatles are coming. The Beatles are coming from Britain, from the UK." And I thought to myself, oh my God, we're getting infested by beetles. Bugs. I didn't know what they meant.
I didn't either.
Yeah. I was, 10 or 11. I didn't, at that point know the Beatles. So, but then when I got out of the hospital, I saw them I listened to them on the radio, of course, but then saw them on the Ed Sullivan Show. And it was like, and of course, our parents are in the background because everybody got together on Sunday night and watched Ed, right?
Yep.
So they're in the background. It's like, oh my God, turn down the noise.
Right.
You can't even understand them. You can't understand what they're saying. And nowadays we look at that and we say, oh my gosh, that's mild music.
Yeah. Ed Sullivan broke a lot of barriers with his show. I remember seeing Elvis the first time, and I looked at him and I thought, oh my God, this changes everything I ever thought about music.
Yeah, I agree. The Beatles, again, for me, it was always the Beatles. It wasn't the Rolling Stones. It was the Beatles. I wasn't crazy about Mick Jagger, and I didn't appreciate his music. Being that young, a lot of it had to do with visual. And the Beatles to me were visually pleasing,
Yeah.
good looking guys. They played some nice music, and then it was later on when I was in high school that I really got to appreciate Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
And understood them more.
Well, I like them too, but I was always a Beatles guy, and I followed them as closely as possible for many years. But then somebody came on my radar that I think I took the first album that I ever bought of theirs, and I played it over and over and over, and that was the Deja Vu album by CSNY.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, great album. It's so sad, to see David Crosby pass recently.
Rest in peace, David.
Yeah. Talk about a guy who's been everywhere all the time. And even before Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Young. I just, yeah, what can you say about David Crosby? That music, again, was the type of thing where I remember it playing when I went to college. I lived in dorms, and that album and the Simon and Garfunkel, and I can still hear Scarborough Fair being played.
Lovely song.
Through the hallways and the dormitories, but yeah, Crosby, I love that album.
Oh,
I
I
love Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young anyway, all their albums. But,
well, it's where I first started trying to sing harmony, and it was just a dismal failure. But I was aiming a little bit too high. Ron, tell me what's on the musical menu for you. What are you working on? Any projects now that we need to know about?
Well, you and I have played a little bit back and forth, and
and enjoyed every second of it.
We enjoyed it, and you introduced me to Michael.
Yeah,
Michael Campbell, and Michael and I have been playing pretty consistently for the past, I guess, 6 months or so. And we've written a couple of pieces. We're working on some new stuff. And Michael, of course, is a prolific writer.
Yes, he is.
And
great musician.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, I felt it the first time you invited him to come and play with us when we were playing. And being he was playing bass, and drummers and bass players always seem to click.
There's a simpatico there.
Yeah. So we hit it right off, and so we're developing some stuff, and we also are putting together enough songs to start playing at some gigs.
Cool.
So yeah, we're looking forward to that. We're hoping by summertime we'll have enough down that we'll be able to do that. We've got a couple other people that are playing with us on and off, which is Francisca and Priya.
Oh, wonderful.
Wonderful voices, and Francisca plays a great guitar. And they had to take a little time off to help with their developing their business, but they're looking back next month, and that's when we're really looking to put some new music together and play out.
Well, I sure hope you guys get into into a studio, into a recording context, and put some of this down.
Well, I would love to be able to. I wrote lyrics for a song for Children of Ukraine.
Yeah.
That came from a poem that I wrote, and you helped start developing that song, and Michael has helped with revising it and really pushing me to get the song down on tape, because he thinks that it's got a lot of potential.
I've heard that song. It's wonderful.
Thank you. And it's, what is it about? What is it about music that we write music or we write lyrics or whatever? It's, we want to have some kind of legacy, I think. Whether it's just our kids or whether it's friends or somebody who enjoys what we do, I think that's part of it. We want to be recognized. We want to, we have egos. I think musicians all have egos.
Oh, sure.
So we love to be in the spotlight. We love to be on stage, and we love playing in front of people. And I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to get back and do that. Because when I played with my band Flip in the 90s, We opened up for Hootie and the Blowfish up in Baltimore at the bank. That was, I guess, 94, I think early 94. And it was, and I didn't know who Hootie and the Blowfish were. Within a couple of weeks, my wife at the time calls me into the living room. She says, "Look at this," and I'm watching VH1, and there were Hootie and the Blowfish on, and I was like, "Oh my God, we just opened for those guys up in Baltimore." Now they're a national act, but my experience with them was really, I think, an incredible piece of coincidence, I think, because when we opened up for them, I'm setting up on stage and Darius Rucker comes out from the wings, and he goes, "Hey man, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Are you with the other band?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Are you Hootie?" He says, "Oh no, man." He says, "There hasn't been a Hootie in 8 or 10 years. I said, "Well, then you must be one of the Blowfish." And he starts laughing. He says, "Yeah, man." He says, "If anything, I'm a Blowfish, all right." And it was really funny, that encounter. And in fact, I was just we were chatting the other day on Facebook. He's got a great Facebook page, and him and I messaged him a few months ago. I said, "I don't know if you remember me back from," and I described myself, and he said, "Absolutely." He said, "You were the guy with Blowfish asking me about being a Blowfish." I said, "You got it." I said, "You've got a great memory, man, after all the stuff you've been through over the last 30 years. But yeah, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget.
Well, Ronnie, you're a unique individual. You make an impression on everybody you meet. Look, I really want to thank you for joining us this morning. This has been Billy Earl on Delmarvalous Americana on WSDL, on YouTube, and on Pac 14. Thank you, amigo. And give Carol a big kiss for me.
I will, and same to Linda. And I appreciate being here. Love you.
You're the man, buddy.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
I'm just looking for a 4-leaf clover. I'm just looking for.
This has been Delmarvalous Americana here on WSDL 90.7 FM and streaming at delmarvapublicmedia.org. We produce this show at Delmarva Public Media Salisbury University Studio, and we get production help from Angela Semig and Brian Russo, who is our managing director. Remember, you can find this program on the YouTube channel, on Pac 14, and of course, special thanks to my guest today. Make sure and check out their music and/or art and everything they do. I'm Billy Earl, and thanks for listening to Delmarvalous Americana. And if you remember one thing from today, just remember that a life without music and art just ain't hardly worth it.